Two toolboxes sit in the same garage, exposed to the same humidity, owned by the same person. One of them holds hand tools that look brand new, with wrenches that still shine and pliers with perfect jaws and screwdrivers without a single orange spot anywhere on them. The other toolbox tells a different story, covered in rust and pitting and corrosion so bad that some tools had to be thrown out entirely. The only difference between them came down to a DIY rust prevention method using beeswax and mineral oil. A two-ingredient homemade mix so cheap it costs less than a cup of coffee, and so effective that machinists have relied on it since before your grandfather was born. This is the story of the rust-proofing method the industry buried, because when tools last forever, nobody needs to buy new ones. And by the end of this video, you'll learn the one mistake that ruins this mix completely, the thing that turns a perfect protectant into a sticky mess that attracts dust and actually speeds up corrosion instead of stopping it. But first, let's start with an experiment that shocked even the machinist who ran it. A retired machinist in Ohio decided to put every rust prevention method he could find to the test. He took 12 identical steel plates, cleaned them all the same way, and applied a different treatment to each one. Plate 1 got WD-40, Plate 2 got commercial rust inhibitor spray, Plate 3 got motor oil, Plate 4 got Renaissance wax, Plate 5 got Cosmoline, and Plate 6 got the beeswax and mineral oil mix. He left all 12 plates outside for 6 months through rain and snow and summer humidity, testing everything from modern vapor corrosion inhibitors to traditional long-term tool storage methods. The results weren't even close. Rust spots showed up on the WD-40 plate within 3 weeks. The commercial spray held on for about 2 months before breaking down. Motor oil attracted dirt and created a grimy layer that trapped moisture underneath the surface. Even the Renaissance wax, used by museums worldwide, showed patina formation after 4 months. The Cosmoline, that old military rust preventative, performed well but required heat for removal. But Plate 6, the one coated with the DIY beeswax and mineral oil mix, came back looking almost exactly like the day he treated it. 6 months of weather exposure and barely a spot to show for it. The machinist wrote in his notes that he'd been buying rust prevention products for 40 years, and this test exposed them for what they really are. The ingredients on Plate 6 were beeswax and mineral oil, nothing else. 2 things you can pick up at any pharmacy and craft store for under $8 total, enough to protect every hand tool you own for years. Welcome to the channel. If this is your first time here, this is what we do. We recover the workshop knowledge that got buried when planned obsolescence became the standard business model. Subscribe and hit the bell, because these methods don't show up in your feed unless you tell YouTube you want them. The beeswax and mineral oil trick didn't come from the internet last year, and it has a history stretching back more than a century. Machine shops in Detroit during the 1920s faced a serious problem because precision instruments cost a fortune, and a single rusted caliper could throw off an entire production run. Commercial rust preventatives barely existed back then, so machinists developed their own solutions. The formula passed from master machinist to apprentice over decades. Equal parts beeswax and mineral oil melted together and applied warm. Old-timers in those shops called it shop paste, or sometimes just the mix. Shipyard workers in Baltimore used something similar to protect rigging tools from the constant salt air. Maintenance crews in the steel mills of Pittsburgh coated precision gauges with the same combination. Gunsmiths throughout the Appalachians treated firearm internals with it before long-term storage. What connects all of these traditions is a simple fact the industry doesn't want you thinking about: that rust prevention doesn't require proprietary chemicals or annual subscriptions to new products. It requires understanding what rust actually is and creating a barrier that stops it at the source. Let's head to the workbench. You need 2 things: pure beeswax and mineral oil. The beeswax should be actual beeswax like beekeepers sell or craft stores carry, not paraffin wax or scented candle wax, about 2 tablespoons or roughly an ounce. The mineral oil is the same anhydrous stuff pharmacies sell as a laxative, no additives and no fragrance, about 4 tablespoons total. Put the beeswax in a small glass jar or metal tin and set that jar in a pot of simmering water to create a double boiler setup. Never put beeswax directly over a flame. As the wax melts at its melting point of around 145 degrees Fahrenheit, slowly add the mineral oil and stir until you get a uniform liquid throughout. The sign that it's ready is when it looks like warm honey, slightly golden and completely smooth with no chunks of solid wax floating around. Take it off the heat and let it cool down. As it cools, the mixture thickens into a soft paste with a consistency like firm lip balm or shoe polish. That's your homemade rust prevention compound, and it will last for years stored in a sealed container. When it's time to apply, spread a thin layer with a rag or your fingers. The key word is thin, just enough to coat the metal and not a thick glob sitting on top. Hand tools you use regularly only need one coat every few months, and tools going into long-term storage should get a coat before you wrap them in cloth or paper. The whole process takes about 15 minutes, and the cost comes out to less than $8 for enough paste to last most people a decade. Now let's get into why this works when so many commercial products fail. Rust comes down to simple chemistry, where iron combines with oxygen and water to form iron oxide. That orange corrosion eating your tools is literally the metal binding with moisture in the air. Beeswax creates a physical barrier against this process because it's hydrophobic, meaning it repels water. When you coat a tool with this mix, you seal out the moisture that would otherwise kickstart oxidation. But here's what makes beeswax different from synthetic alternatives. The wax is naturally self-healing, and minor scratches and abrasions don't create weak spots because the wax slowly flows back together at room temperature. Mineral oil serves two functions in the mix. First, it keeps the wax soft enough to apply and to maintain that self-healing property, since pure beeswax alone would be too hard and brittle to work with. Second, the oil penetrates into microscopic pores in the metal surface, and even polished steel has tiny imperfections that wax alone can't reach. The oil fills those gaps and creates protection at a microscopic level. What they create together is something commercial products struggle to replicate: a breathing barrier. The coating isn't airtight, so it allows metal to expand and contract with temperature changes without cracking. Synthetic coatings often fail because they can't flex with the metal underneath. This explains why tools treated with this mix still look perfect after decades, because the protection moves with the metal instead of fighting against it. You're probably wondering why hardware stores don't sell this if it works so well. The answer comes down to shelf life and profit margins. A jar of beeswax and mineral oil paste has no expiration date, it doesn't dry out, it doesn't need reformulation every year, and nobody can patent it. There's no way to build a subscription model around something that lasts forever. Commercial rust preventatives work on a different principle, designed to need reapplication. They evaporate, they break down, they give you 60 days of protection instead of 60 months. There's also a packaging problem, since beeswax paste needs warming for easy application and doesn't spray out of an aerosol can. Hardware stores want products that seem convenient even when they perform worse. What you find on shelves are aerosol sprays full of solvents that evaporate within hours, leaving behind a film that works for weeks instead of years. For anyone willing to spend 15 minutes making this at home, that gap between commercial and homemade becomes an opportunity. Now here's the mistake I mentioned at the beginning, the one that ruins this mix completely. Some people try to save time by heating the mineral oil and beeswax too hot, either boiling it or throwing it in the microwave. When you overheat this mixture above about 180 degrees Fahrenheit, the beeswax breaks down and the chemical structure that makes it self-healing gets destroyed. What you end up with is a sticky coating that never quite sets right, staying tacky and attracting dust and grit, and that grit holds moisture against the metal surface. Overheated paste doesn't prevent rust, it accelerates it. The fix is simple: low heat and patience. Simmering water in a double boiler keeps the temperature in the right range, and the wax melts completely at its melting point of around 145 degrees. There's no reason to rush it. The old machinists had a saying about this, that if you see smoke, you've wrecked it. Stay below the smoke point, and the problem never comes up. The basic 2-ingredient mix handles most situations, but if you want to customize it, here are 3 variations the old-timers used. For extreme humidity, add a small amount of anhydrous lanolin at about half a teaspoon per batch. Lanolin is what makes sheep's wool naturally water-resistant, and it boosts the hydrophobic properties of the mix. For tools that see heavy use, mix in a drop of tea tree oil or clove oil, since these natural antimicrobials prevent the organic components from ever going rancid even in hot workshops. For firearms and precision instruments, use a higher ratio of oil to wax at about 3:1 instead of 2:1, creating a thinner coating that won't interfere with tight tolerances. Each variation is optional, but together they give you a family of protective coatings that cover every tool in your shop. the rust prevention industry pulls in over $30 billion a year in global sales. A jar of beeswax and a bottle of mineral oil cost less than lunch. Workshop knowledge like this got buried when companies figured out there's no money in solutions that last forever. But the methods don't disappear, they just get passed along by the people who still care about doing things right. Next week, we're covering the wood finish that lasts 100 years and why hardware stores stopped carrying it in the 1970s. Subscribe so you don't miss it. So,